Aaron Tokarz, welcome back to the journey. It has been just a few weeks since you were here on the journey the first time, and we had talked about doing a part two, and ideally before you and Flan headed back on the road. But just to again recap of what is the journey about. The journey is having guests come on and just have ordinary conversations about individuals who through different things in their life, maybe setbacks, maybe illnesses, maybe different things that may have happened, how have they taken those things, became stronger, developed resiliency because of those things, and transformed, maybe failed forward. And you've had, as you talked about in the first time, a couple different things, and some career changes were a big part of what happened in your life. Former police officer and had a near-death experience with pancreatitis, right?
Yep.
And then became a photographer, and you and your wife Lan became wedding photographers and did that. And then a year ago, took on a different journey.
Yeah, the path kind of took a big left turn.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't you kind of just bring us after being on, just a few weeks ago, any particular thoughts after, I know we talked about a lot of things regarding the trip, but any particular thoughts while over the past month? I know you've been working hard to doing some construction work and things like job type stuff to get ready for the next leg of the journey, but any particular things after the last time we talked?
Yeah, it's only been a few weeks, but there's been a lot that's gone on. I am super excited.
Okay.
I just feel not a newfound joy in life, but I'm really excited about this Friday. Okay. And I know you know this, but for those who don't know it, we've basically been, like you had said, in the Rockford area for about a month now. We came back from being on the road for a year, and that year we talked a little bit about it last time, about that first crazy month and how the rest of the year progressed. But the last couple of weeks that we've been in Rockford, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. I have been doing construction. We've been doing work on some of our own properties. We've been doing some work on the bus. We've been doing some work on ourselves. And in the last few weeks, I've actually been a little bit beat up. That happens, I think, sometimes when you're a little too sporadic. Sometimes it catches up. And in the last 3 days, I met with a good friend of mine. He came over. We spent 6 hours together on Saturday, which allowed us to really fellowship together. He's a guy that I met in church 25 plus years ago. Okay. We reconnect every couple of months. Okay. Or now it's been a year, but sure. And that was awesome to get that connection back with him again. And then last night, Flan and I did our needed to sit down and reconnect, because we've both been going just a million miles an hour to try to get out of here on Friday. And then this morning we had coffee. So, okay. And I bring those things up because one of the things that Flan and I have noticed is when we have this disconnect, which happens every once in a while, it happened in that first month of us being away, once we reconnect, it definitely recharges both of us. And we've been so trying to get out of here that we didn't lose sight of what the goal was, but sure. There's been a lot of stuff going on. Sure. Yeah. And now that we're within 4 days of leaving, it's there's still a ton of stuff on the plate, but I've been able to calm myself and just be okay, get back to the intention, get back to the what are we doing, why are we going out. Again, we haven't lost that in the last month, but it's been a little different. Our norm is not everybody's norm, which it was not everybody's norm before either, but now it's like 180 degrees. So where most people, I think we had mentioned this, most people they get all, I don't know if it's stressed out of a vacation, but a vacation is the not norm.
Yeah.
And this is not a vacation for us,
right.
But getting back on the road and having the constant moving piece is, we need that. We miss it. And I'm really excited to get back on the road and kind of start part 3 of this journey.
Okay. Well, just for some of the individuals that may have just picked up on this one and not had listened to the first part when you were on, what exactly
what
a year ago? What are you talking about? A year ago, you and Philan and your 3 kids and your dog.
Yes.
And if you could just give the layout of the kids again.
Sure.
And then and what was looking back to a year ago? What was the goal then? And then what did it actually become?
Wow. Yeah. So my wife and I have 3 kids, Cashin, Brig, and Freya, and they are 11, 9, and 7-year-old. We also do have a dog, a Catahoula leopard dog, which picked him up on the road. And when I say on the road, a year ago, about a year and a half ago, Philan and I decided that we needed to make some big changes. And the biggest change was, from an emotional standpoint, I think, was to be more present with each other and to be more present with the kids. From a physical standpoint, it was, we are going to move out of our house, buy a school bus, move into a school bus, live in a school bus, and travel the country with our kids and go experience life a little bit differently. So we have been on the road for a year. We left last July. We just got back again about a month ago. The first year was an incredibly rewarding experience. We had an intention to be more present with the kids, see some of the country, try to figure out where we eventually want to land, if we want to land, and spend one year on the road. Yeah. And we're just about to go into year 2.
Yeah.
So,
and if you were able to grab something from that first overall context, that first year for yourself, what do you think was one of those things that you most? Because there was definitely great times, but there was also times that there was struggle. Just learning the bus itself, and you talked a lot about that, before. But what would be say if there was one overall takeaway from the first year? What was that? What was that takeaway?
I think it would be learning to be open.
Okay.
And when I say learning to be open for possibilities, be open for leadership, for guidance, in a spiritual sense. Okay. I noticed, I think at the end of the last session, we talked a little bit about this Florida thing that happened. And if you are just jumping on board, go back and listen to episode 27. But when I look back over the last year, there were definitely ups and downs, but the entire time we were being guided along a path. And I'm really looking forward to what this next year brings, because going into last year, when we first left, it was chaos. It was not having a plan. It was being all over the board, and it was beautiful, and there were awesome things about it. But there was a time when I wasn't ready for that, or I wasn't open for being guided, led. And then towards the latter half of the year, I think I just let things go in a good way. Not like let it go like didn't care, but let it go like was just open for things. And now going into this next year, I think that's going to have a huge benefit that we're starting the year that way. Okay. And we have a little bit more of a plan, which...
Yeah, tell us what.
We're not planners.
Yeah. Well, not 100%. You definitely are probably less of a planner than Flan.
Yes.
And Flan likes at least the structure of the idea of a plan.
She does, yeah.
So what seems to be different, or what do you have? What's some of the intention of what this upcoming time period looks like?
Up until a few days ago, we had a general idea that we were going to go to the West Coast. Okay. And the West Coast was more just, we haven't spent a lot of time out there. And there are so many gorgeous things in this country that we want to experience and see and have the kids experience and see. That was just kind of the overall plan. And that, for me, is very easy. Now we'll just turn left here or turn right there. But in doing that, that goes back to that first month of being on the bus when it was just so chaotic because we didn't have we had no direction at that point. But we've been able to, in the last couple of weeks, sit down and come up with at least an idea of where we want to be and when we want to be and what are the key locations that we want to be at.
Okay.
So it's still a very open-ended. Some people would freak out about how open-ended and free-flowing it's going to be.
Sure.
But we have we're heading in a certain direction. Both, I think, as a couple, as a family, but then also physically where we're going on the bus. And I'm really excited about this next year because this next year, according to a map and according to a calendar, maybe leads into another year.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some eventual goals, which is pretty neat to have.
Okay.
I'm also looking forward to the fact that you're on the road and don't really know what's going to happen next and what's around the corner. But I think one of the things that we're definitely looking at concentrating more on is each other.
Okay.
And that I'm really excited about that.
Okay. And yeah, talk a little bit about that because people are like, okay, so you're on a bus and there's 5 people and a dog, and what do you mean? How do you not focus on the other person? Right. But there's ways.
Oh yeah.
there's ways.
I think starting with my wife and I, we've talked about in that first month about not having any communication, and moving forward, how having the communication greatly helped. And everybody can tell you that a relationship is based on communication, but there are times in your life that you fail. That's basically it. We've realized more and more the importance of not date night for us, but date morning. For us, if we've gone out to dinner to reconnect, or go out on a date night on a Saturday night or a Friday night to reconnect and to talk, we do so much during the day that by the time it comes to 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, our brains kind of start to shut down. And we've realized that about each other. Okay. And so we've realized that mornings I'm not a morning person, and anybody that knows me is like, what do you mean you're getting up at 6 in the morning and doing coffee with your wife? That's crazy. But what it's led to is more meaningful conversations and more meaningful, a more meaningful relationship. I think I'm noticing things that my wife needs, and I'm doing my best to be a little less selfish. Okay. And saying, okay, let's, what is the, there's not a conflict, but if there's an issue or if there's something going on, maybe it's not, there's something else too, and learning to just ask more.
Okay.
I don't know if that. Yeah, that's new for me too. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Well, I think one of the things that happen a lot of times with individuals is that maybe it's in close proximity, in close situations, where we'll read how the other person's feeling, and then we'll assume that it has something to do with us, or we have something that we want to do, and the other person's distracted or disconnected or whatever, and then we get upset. So there's this constant people doing a lot of talking in their own head about what they think or feel is going on, and then making assumptions and judgments of the other person or what needs are being met and not met.
Yeah, we've both learned that making assumptions for us gets us in a lot of trouble, and it's getting away from that has been really good.
In learning to not only talk about those things, but learning how for ourselves to monitor, am I just feeling this right at the moment? And do I need, because it's really hard to take that back, what's that saying? It's really hard to unring the bell. You know, it's and if I say that and I don't qualify it as I'm just talking, I go, this may not be right, but I'm just saying, you know, this is just where I'm at right now. And we talk about, sometimes in counseling, we talk about this idea that my feelings or what's going on right now, I may be being honest about it, but that may not be my truth.
Right.
And I think using some kind of framework, some kind of platform in which to be able to have open dialogue, at the same time, not that every word that comes out of your mouth is law, because it may just be how I'm emotionally feeling at the moment, but it may not be how I overall, my truth or overall belief.
Yeah. And that comes into play, I think, even more. You talked about the small space. So again, 225 square feet is what we're living in, and we are each other's counselor. We are each other's best friend. We are each other's enemy at times. I don't want to say enemy because that's not the right, but you know, you get in this. There has to, it's a lot. It's a challenge to be in that small space, because not only is it physically a small space, but if you don't have a home base, then you don't have that network of friends or network of people that you can reach out to. Our norm is to be with each other 24/7. For a lot of people and friends of ours that I'd say the average American, they don't spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with their spouse. Right. They get up in the morning, they go to work. There's that separation. There's the drive home to maybe separate work from home, get home. There's that reconnection. There's a few hours, and then there's the weekend. And for us, it's all the time. It's as a couple, when we were wedding photographers, because we shot weddings together, and then we did life Monday through Friday together, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And for us, being on the bus together all the time goes back to what we feel most comfortable with, but it's also a little more challenging because you can't just, well, you could get on your bike and ride away from the bus, but there's not like, oh, my friend that I've known for 20 years is right down the corner, I can call him and I can go have breakfast with him. That becomes a little more challenging.
Yeah, because it's different than what was how things were your normal before, right? And in learning to be open and learning how to have thicker skin at certain times and how to be more pliable at other times, I think are all key things that as the opportunity comes up and you learn. Not much different, though, when you have individuals that are going off to college for the first time and going and living in a dorm, or individuals that are in the military. There's other police officers or firemen. There's certain settings and environments that are very similar. It just, as you said, that is not the typical American family today. Is not doing that with having the husband, wife, mom, and dad, and the kids all in this 225. rectangle with wheels.
Yeah.
So talk about the kids. Each had opportunities to go to camps this summer.
Yep.
And have, and it's not like when you were on the road you were constantly moving. You'd be stationary for maybe a month, maybe a couple weeks, maybe 3 months, and so that wasn't necessarily new for them to be in Rockford for a month. But some of the outside of the family activities was a little bit different. And what is it? Where are the kids at regarding them? Are they excited about getting back on the road? Are they been in Rockford too long where they want to stay grounded? What's going on with the kids?
No, the kids, we came back, and the very first thing that the kids did was went to camp. Mm-hmm. They've gone the last, I think Cash and this was his 6th or 7th year. They go to a YMCA camp about an hour from here, and all 3 of them went this year, which is kind of how they started the summer. They got to reconnect with some friends. They got to reconnect with still doing outside activities, but doing them more as individuals than just being with us. So they got that, I don't want to say out of the way, but they got that recharge. Yeah. Freya, it was her 2nd year in camp. Brig, it was his 4th year. Brig, the kids grow in leaps and bounds, which is really neat to see. But Cashin's biggest thing, and he's the 11-year-old, his biggest challenge for the last year has been his lack of having his close friends, because he was in the same classroom, but at least with the same core group of kids for years in Rockford schools. And so when we left on the bus, his biggest concern was, well, what about my friends? What about that? And we've met a lot of really interesting, cool other families in the last year, which I know that those friendships are going to continue. Mm-hmm. But he still had his core, like 2 or 3 buddies that we knew he was going to miss. Mm-hmm. He kept a little bit in contact with them on the road, but it was really neat to see he went to he went with one of his buddies' parents to pick him up on the last day of school, and I saw a video of them reconnecting, and it was really cool. Nice. Now, in the last month, I've barely seen him, which is a little bit odd, but he's spent a lot of time with friends. Done some long weekends with some of his friends' families, and they've each spent time at grandparents' houses. And so they've been able to reconnect, and I think that's been really good for them, because it's been a lot of quality time in a very short time period, so I think he's gotten a big boost. Same thing with him and but going on the road, I think, not that he's gotten that out of his system, but he's got to kind of re-energize those friendships. And at 11 years old, that's really important. He's at this age where he's starting to grow up a little more. He's getting a little more independent. But we've also figured out a way to have him still keep in contact with his friends. And one of the dads has expressed interest in possibly flying out and meeting us during like a spring break or something. So we're trying to make that happen. So that's been really that's been neat. He's excited to go back on the road. He's excited. And then the other 2, they spent, again, a lot of time at camp, or they spent a week at camp, and then they've spent a lot of time with grandparents. They're a little younger, and so they've been bouncing around between grandparents, and it's they've been spoiled a little bit in the last couple of months. I have to remind grandma that we need to take it easy a little bit, but they're grandmas, so we let them. They get a little bit of leniency.
Sure. One of the, and I don't think we touched on it to any significant degree last time. We just barely opened up the conversation, but about the idea of, there's maybe people listening, they get a couple questions, right?
Yep.
Like, so how are the kids doing with the schooling thing? How do they do school? their school just stop? Did their education process just stop? How does that work? I guess if you're constantly moving, I guess the state doesn't, so how does that, how are they continuing their education process? How are they continuing to, they're learning tons of things, I know, but how are they, those, what we'd say, basic things that they're going to need as they go into their future?
Sure. So currently we're practicing unschooling.
Okay.
And unschooling is a little looser version, a little more loose version of homeschooling.
Okay.
So I would say traditional homeschooling would be a very maybe a strict curriculum, maybe a support group where you've got some other groups of families that the kids can still do things with.
Right.
But a lot of it is very curriculum based. Yeah. So you have your reading, you have your writing, you have your science, you have your history, you have your math, and it's a very structured day, but it's just at home.
Right.
So for us, unschooling is our kids are still being educated, but a lot of it is more hands-on learning. So they are still reading. Cashin is reading Greek mythology and Roman mythology and doing a lot of exploration into that. He's 11 and he just picked up the Iliad and he's wanting to blaze through that, and I'm like, okay, kid, but to go along with that or to coincide with that, for example, we were in Kansas City, Missouri this summer, and the art museum there has a huge wing that is all Greek mythology. Okay. So we went into the museum, hit that wing specifically for him, spent extra time with him in that wing, and he blew my mind of, this is the god of this, and this is so-and-so, and this is... So we're trying to incorporate things like museum visits or art visits to supplement education.
Okay.
So that's part of it, is finding museums, and museums is the biggest thing when you're out, because it also gives you a little bit of if there's a rain delay and you don't want to be in the bus, hit up a museum, which helps in the education process. Mm-hmm. But they're all still reading. They're all learning math as we go. Even little things like I was playing Monopoly with the 7-year-old the other day, and I didn't tell her anything about how the game's played, and she's counting back change out of, she's making change for her properties and things that she's buying, okay. And we're seeing the education continue. Mm-hmm. The other big thing that we stress, and I think society has gotten away from human interaction. This is going to go way out there, but not way out there, but so many kids now are just hooked up and plugged in. You're in the grocery store and there's a 2-year-old who's on the iPhone. Yeah. There's kids that, you've got a junior high age kid who can't walk into a store and order something off the counter because he or she doesn't know how to look at the clerk in the eye, because there's this disconnect. Sure. with kind of where society is right now. Mm-hmm. And our kids still do use an iPad. They still do get to have screen time. But I think what they're seeing is mom and dad interacting with people, mm-hmm. and how treating people with respect and how that kind of comes full circle. Mm-hmm. And they're being able to experience that firsthand and not just being told to look at somebody in the eye, not just being told to extend a hand and do the handshake. Sure. And how far that goes. We were in Portland, Oregon last year. Okay. And Portland is a little more liberal with their parking regulations and with where you can park a bus, and it's very open, and you can live on your bus wherever you want as long as you can legally park. And we had parked in a neighborhood that was close to where we wanted to explore for that kind of weekend. And I walked up to the door of the house that we were parked in front of and knocked on the door and introduced myself. And the homeowner, she was very grateful of me just having that interaction, and said, yeah, sure, you can, it's great, use the parking spot on the side of the bus. And we had come back from a day being out, and there was a note on the front of the bus. when you're on a bus and you get a note on the front of the bus, it's usually a, hey, you can't park here. Hey, move. It's not always a positive experience.
Sure.
But this note was from another neighbor who saw our bus, had looked it up on Instagram, got a quick feel of what we were doing, and reached out and said, hey, why don't you park by our house? A block down. And so the next morning, Philan and I went for our run, and we were stretching actually in front of that person's house, trying to be like, where do we go with this? And the homeowner, this second homeowner, had pulled up the one that left a note, and she introduced herself and said, I'm a school teacher, my husband's a postman, our kids are in college, we have these 4 parking spots that were normally full of our kids' cars, but now they're not. The neighbor down the street, yes, it's great that you parked in front of there, and she'll never say anything, but you're kind of in our kids' parking spots. So why don't you come park by us? And so we moved our bus up and engaged in more conversation with her. And an hour later, our kids are playing in her front yard. We're getting vegetables out of her garden. Mm-hmm. We're filling up our bus with water. And none of that would have happened if it wouldn't have been for me or Philan or us to be outgoing and go up to that first neighbor and be like, hey, here's who we are, this is what we're doing. And so the kids are seeing, I think, maybe, and that's just one example, but the kids are seeing the benefits of social interaction. Yeah. And I just look forward to 15 years from now when I'm watching my kid have a meaningful face-to-face conversation with somebody and thinking, well, maybe that's from being on the bus, and maybe that's from learning how to talk to people face-to-face and not just be on a screen.
Sure.
So. Well, and I know that's way more. That goes a whole bunch of different directions besides just unschooling. Yeah. But you learn. Kids are sponges. Yeah. They're soaking up everything.
In business or in education, I guess we talk about hard skills, right? That's math and science and reading and writing and being able to write well and and comprehension. And then you have soft skills, right? The soft skills are everything you were just talking about. And I think there are times, if the more structured an environment is, and it doesn't ever move beyond that, right? There's a time when we need that structure. There's a time when you have to figure out how to do, or be disciplined enough to get a task done, or disciplined enough to continue the journey of getting the bus to the next place, when every part of you goes, I don't want to do this. I don't feel like doing this. Well, discipline says it doesn't matter. You still need to go. And sometimes we need to learn how to work through that. That's another one of those aspects that our kids will pick up on as they watch us, or they will watch what we do with that. The alternative to that, right? Yeah. But I like the idea of, especially because of the ages where your kids are at right now, being able to explore what they're interested in and doing a deeper dive into that, versus maybe a lot of content that they may not be interested in. And we had a guest last week talk about this idea. She's an art teacher at one of the local grade schools, and being able to explore through art this idea and be able to be creative and actually learning, because you're interested in doing something, a deeper dive into that versus just regurgitation for a score.
Yeah.
So, but in my mind, I guess I'm also just imagining. So, being, visionary, right? And I was the individual growing up that set goals and benefited from setting goals. So and specifically with athletics, and so as I'm listening to you talk and thinking, as my kids are now older, right? My daughter will be 21, in a few weeks, and my son's 23. And they're in a different place. Would I've been able to be, when my kids were your kids' age, would I've been courageous enough? I'm asking myself that. I don't know. I don't know if I would be courageous enough to go outside of this box that I had created I want to say I'd be bold enough to do that. I want to say, but so tell because you're a little bit more of a risk taker.
Yep.
And Flan is I would not call conservative, but she has a tendency to as much of a risk taker you are and a people person, she will also maybe pull back a little bit from that, even though she is pretty social as well. So how do you deal with those things? Like, let's say, and they're maybe not at that age yet, but how do you write properly? How do you formulate a particular, sentence or a paragraph, or be able to tell a story, but from a written format, not just an oral standpoint?
So one of the things that we did last year at the beginning of the trip, we did get away from it a little bit, but it is one of the priorities of this year, is to have the kids journal.
Okay.
And have the kids write down their stories.
Okay.
Now, for Freya, the 7-year-old, it may be more pictures and it may be more simplistic.
Yeah.
But with Cashin, we're encouraging him to write.
Okay.
And then working with him on telling his story.
Okay.
And in part of telling his story, it's documenting his life experiences for himself to look back at, which I think will be pretty neat. But then it also gives us a teaching opportunity.
Yeah.
I am way more of a grammatically, as I say, I'm more grammatically correct, and I can't even say it. But I love the written word. I love to write in sentence structure and all those things, which is something else that you may not have known about me in the years, but I really enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And so for me to be able to kind of help him out with that, I think is going to be good. Again, I'm more concentrating on the 11-year-old at this point because his skill level is a little higher, where the 9-year-old is still getting more into writing but he's also more of our adventurous, outgoing. Mm-hmm. His personality is a little different. He's the one that wants to go out and build a bow and arrow. Mm-hmm. But with that comes his own different set of learning and his own different set of responsibility and learning to be more independent and do things on his own and get away from just I guess it's more getting away from the norm, which is, but it's also, being bold has its challenges. It's not always easy, but I think it's rewarding at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and I think any time, and not that you guys are the first family or the first couple that's ever done this. There's obviously other people you've met along the way that are also doing this.
Yeah, and I'm going to interrupt you on that one for a second. Okay. But one thing that we have noticed with bus life, van life, people on the road families, a lot of the other families that we've met have younger kids. And so that's a whole different, I think that we're into a different set of challenges right now because we have an 11-year-old that's going to be a teenager soon. We have a 9-year-old who's the middle child, and we have the 7-year-old she's 7, so she's not just the little 2-year-old toddler that you can throw on your back when you're going on a hike. It's just a little different when you have the ages are. I don't know how long we're going to be able to do it. They're going to outgrow their beds, and there's interesting not adult, but there's conversations coming with our 11-year-old about how the body works and everything else, which is where that presents its own set of challenges in and of itself. But we're dealing with that and rolling with it. But it's really also really neat to be able to see that firsthand, where when your kid goes to school every day for 8 hours and you're at work every 8 hours and you connect with your kid for an hour or two in the evening. And on the weekends, that's way different than being there watching your kid grow. Yeah. And that's hugely beneficial, very selfishly for me. But it's also, I think it'll benefit our kids.
Yeah. And that goes back to what we originally started with this challenge and opportunity that comes with being present, with being not in your head, with being present, and continue to try to come back to that place of being present to see it. Because as we talked, you can be there but not be there.
Yep.
Either because you're in your head because of negativity, or looking too far ahead and not really seeing what's going on. And I can see that that's definitely something that you're being a lot more intentional about on this leg of the journey than before, because you didn't know what you didn't know before, and,
right.
and now you know some of those things. So another question I have for you, because I'm just curious,
yep.
right? And we've touched base on, you and I have touched base on this a little bit, but because I guess it's probably another one of my way back over here fears. So how do you make money again? Because you're not, unless something's changed since the last time I talked to you, I don't think you guys are trust fund babies.
No,
and buses take diesel, gasoline, right?
Yeah, and they go really bad on miles per gallon.
Yeah. So what's the how do you bring in income? I mean, you can save some money up and you can live off of that. Mm-hmm. And but do you bring income in while you're on the road? What do you guys do for just basic things like that?
Sure. So yeah, we are definitely not trust fund babies, but I also maybe I'm a little too relaxed when it comes to money. I have a firm belief that it's going to work out and things are going to work out and it'll happen. And
that may not be everybody. I just want to let you know.
Right. Exactly. Not everybody. Yeah. And my wife is the opposite of that. She does stress about the income and she stresses about the funds. Part of me, as a retired police officer on a medical retirement, I do pull in a pension. Okay. So that is beneficial. Okay. That helps. We also, I had mentioned that we rented out our house in Rockford. So we do have 2 houses that we own in Rockford that we rent out. So there is a little bit of income from that, but really what that does is it offsets your mortgage. So we don't have a mortgage.
Right.
Our car, we still own 1 car, but it's paid off.
Sure.
So we don't have a car payment.
Sure.
We also have our studio is rented out. Our photography studio is now rented out for the next year. So that's generating income we own that building, so that's generating some income for us. Besides that, we've gone over our budget a whole bunch of times, and we've learned more to not spend, and it's actually more, instead of learning how to do a budget, and a lot of people do the budget of what can't I spend my money on, we've tried to look at it as what can we spend our money on, so that we're trying to be a little more, it's still a budget at a core, but it's just a little easier to look at. Sure. And it's what are the things that are most important to us that we're willing to spend money on, and therefore if we know what we want to spend on, what are the things that we can cut out. Okay. Besides that, when we were in twice now, we've helped out with bus builds. Okay. So there have been with Instagram and with social media, because we have a decent following, and we've been at a couple of tiny house fests now, which is a showing of your bus. Okay. So with that, we've actually had several people who are in the middle of a bus build or are starting a bus build who are reaching out to us for advice. And so we're starting to explore that more of how can we help out other people building buses. When we were in Florida, we actually helped a woman finish up her bus. So we actually did the construction. We put walls and floors back in because she was kind of at a standstill, which was again, that was that was something that was unexpected.
Okay.
And it came at an incredibly perfect time. And also being open for God to lead us where we need to be. When we were on the road in North Carolina last year, we took kind of a break in North Carolina for a few months, and I met a guy who was doing construction, and his kind of right-hand man had just left to go branch out on his own, and so I picked up a job doing construction with him. I'm a little bit of a tinkerer. I'm pretty good at just having random things thrown at me and being able to figure them out.
Okay.
So I'm able to kind of adapt and adjust.
Okay.
Also with Florida in this last year, I had mentioned that we went to Puerto Rico for 2 months, and that was actually to take a job to rebuild a house that had been damaged in the hurricane. Again, being open to being led, I think has really even benefited us financially. We're at a place now in this next year being a little more structured, which I don't really care about, but it relieves the stress from my wife. We have done a little more budgeting for this year, and how much do we have per month? How much do we have per mile, if you want to say,
Sure.
how can we make our journey in the bus more cost effective?
Sure.
And which will hopefully then extend the journey out longer, because I'd like to do this for a while.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, again, we talked about it last week, we've talked about it numerous times, is this idea of the tension between needing a plan, needing some structure, so that you then can be open to what's on the road, or open to on the journey.
I think a lot of that is also not being distracted by the burdens of life, and then being able to be, I'm just basically repeating what you said, but yeah, not having those things there is so that you can be open.
Yeah.
And that's been huge.
Because it's as simple as it sounds, having been, a former trainer and competitive bodybuilder and stuff, when I structure my meals, I snack less. I know that what's happening. Now, too much of that, then you could become rigid, and then you're not having the flexibility of tasting the other aspects of life. And right. In this case, it would be food, right? But I think that's metaphorically for a lot of things in life, and so I was just curious about that. So in some ways, you guys have been able to put money aside. You have a couple different revenue streams of money coming in. At the heart of what you and Flan have done since you guys have been together has really been entrepreneurial. Yep. And any particular thoughts or projects you guys have going right now, or are you just open to seeing what happens?
We are pretty open to seeing what happens, but we've just with the help of a local marketing guy, we've kind of branded simply Us and a Bus,
sure,
which is what our bus name is. It started with just an idea. An Instagram hashtag is really what it, or an Instagram
tag, right?
Tag is what it started at. And as that progressed, we've now, again, with the help of a graphic designer, he came up with a logo for us, and we've now, I know it sounds minimal, but we've got stickers, we've got t-shirts, we've got hats, all kinds of stuff. And with that is a launching of a website specifically for the bus, which hopefully then can lead to some opportunities of maybe doing a little more consulting with other bus owners. I talked to a guy the other day in Kentucky, and he called and he said, I have this spider web of wires in the bus, and I don't know how to redo my turn signals to make them turn signals from being flashing lights. And I spent about half an hour on the phone with him and just talked him through what he needed to know. And that's just kind of how my brain works. I already did that on my own. I can figure it out. And at some point he said, I'm looking at my wires. Are you looking at yours? And I said, no, it's just up there in my head. It's, and so hopefully that can lead to some opportunities of consulting with other buses, of consulting with this lifestyle, the nomadic kind of lifestyle. And with that, there's a couple of other partnerships that we're starting up on, and hopefully that can lead somewhere.
Good. Well, and it's part of why I was so intrigued by your story. I mean, obviously, I've known you and Flan for a long time. I knew before the conception of this idea, and even as much as I've known about your guys' story and about this part of your guys' life journey, I've had these questions about, so what do you do about these things, and the lessons that you guys learned over the past year, how are you taking those forward? Because you can have the idea of wanting to do this, and it always has to start with that idea or dream, but getting some coaching tips on how to wire something, how to do something physically on the bus, but also how to prepare yourself for the emotional, for the spiritual, let alone the physical and the mental part of going on this journey, I think is just as important, because any of those things can derail everything. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, right? As you found out in that first month, we may want to shit can the whole thing and forget it, right? Yeah. And thank goodness you didn't. And thank goodness that you did learn certain things. As we are looking at this, if there was, for individuals who may be thinking about this, maybe not exactly the same thing, but on their next thing that they're looking at, something stirring inside, right? They've been in.
Don't deny it.
Don't deny it. Yeah. Tell me.
Be bold. Be courageous. We've talked a little bit about living inside the box and living outside the box, and I think that's in the last, few years, that's been a big conversation piece. Yeah. And we spoke about that a few weeks ago. You and I did, and you went a whole different. You went a little deeper than I had initially gone, but being inside the box is very important, because when you're growing up, a lot of it is inside the box thinking, but you're missing a whole bunch of stuff that's infinitely possible outside the box. Yeah. Once you switch your mindset from being an inside the box to an outside the box thinker, then you've got all these possibilities, but a lot of people forget about the inside of the box, or where they came from, or you have to know the inside of the box to be able to experience the outside of the box. And we are trying to now take it a step further, and again, not the first ones that came up with this idea, but we're trying to just live like there is no box, which there is important to being in the box and to being outside the box, but now that we've experienced both, to take down that wall or the barrier of there being a box, and so that we can free flow and be able to experience life in all aspects. Right. And that comes with that. You would ask me if there's a person that has that thing stirring inside of them. Maybe it's not going and living on a bus, because there's like something 1% of people that could do this and could do it well and be okay with it. And I am this is no holier than thou, because it is not easy, but there's a lot of people that have these ideas and they're just afraid to take that first step. Right. My wife more than I, she is constantly coming up with ideas, marketing ideas of what we could do on the bus. The whole fact that we went on the bus started with the whole fact that we were going to move to North Carolina, had the whole thing of, well, then we're going to live in an RV, and it progressed. But at some point, when that idea or that kind of goal started to build and build and build, it still took that being courageous and bold to take that first step. Yeah. For us, it was, okay, we're going to drive down and buy a bus. Right. And once that happened, it put everything in motion. And I think too many people now, they get an idea and they're scared, which is completely
normal. It's
valid. I mean, way. Yeah. But even if it's just a little thing that you're going to do differently, try it.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst that happens is you fail.
Yeah.
And if you fail, it's not failure. You learn from it, and you move on, and it makes you a better person. Yeah. And I think that's, man, if there was one thing I could try to push people for, is don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to look at life differently. Yeah. Life is way too short. Yeah. I learned that 10 years ago. Yeah. And that was a huge change for me, is, be bold, be courageous, go for it. Like I said, the worst that happens is you fail. And it's not failure, it's life.
It may not turn out exactly how you wanted, which then provides an opportunity to learn from. I think if there is such thing in this case as failing, is when I refuse to learn from something that's already happened. Can't do anything about it anyways, it's already happened.
Right.
Might as well learn from it, right? As you were saying earlier, having a plan is important.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a direction and some milestones within it.
For us, as a couple, and even this whole bus venture, and I'll stick with this for a minute. There's only 2 people on our bus that know what the plan is. And so if the plan goes a little to the left or a little to the right, we don't get discouraged about that, because that's part of the adjustment of the plan.
Sure.
Excuse me. Coffee this morning. I think, again, too many people are very concerned with sticking on that rigid plan.
Yeah. Well, and I think,
we don't.
And I think that idea that I don't want to make a mistake. I don't. I want to be successful at whatever that means, and so they out of fear don't take that next step.
But it's also being perceived.
Yeah.
It's that you're being perceived as failing. Society's so many. It's that whole keeping up with the Joneses. It's that making sure that I'm doing things that are right, and I look right to my peers. I'm doing the right thing for my. I still think that we're doing the right thing for our family, so I don't mean it like that, but that's what I think got caught up in, and that was part of it. The traditional. Hey, this is what you got to do. This is what's next. This is what's next. This is what's next. And for us, we were able to get away from that. Yeah. But there's still intention.
Sure.
And it's still. It's been fun. I don't know what's gonna. I'm kind of excited to I'm not at all getting off this bus, but I'm like, what's gonna happen next? Where is life gonna take us?
Sure.
What is gonna be next? Yeah. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I'm open.
And I think that, along with clearly the example both you and Flan have demonstrated for your kids, modeled for them, of persistence and the stick-to-itiveness and that element. And I know people, Flan, may not, when I say disciplined, you're disciplined when sometimes it's at the 11th hour. You've gotten better, but but you're going to work until it gets done.
Yes.
And I've known that about you. And this whole project has been an example of that. And then in those other things, how does that carry over for other things? So I look forward to hearing how Simply Us and a Bus as a business, or at least whatever that may evolve to, or if it evolves to something. But for sure, no matter what, there will be a story. And look forward.
Maybe a book.
Maybe a book. Okay. Okay.
We'll see. A lot of options. We're open to any possibility.
Yeah, exactly. So I will definitely continue looking forward to hearing from you, and then obviously, we stay in touch anyway. So that'll be great. So this coming Friday, you guys are leaving. That's the game plan.
That's That's what's happening.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Aaron, once again, thank you for being here. I know that you have a ton of stuff going on right now, so to squeeze us in to do this, have this conversation, but I think it's critical for those individuals that are in that space and they're restless and normal they're getting squeezed by the normal and their order, that if they get that calling, yep, there's fear. That's because it's real. But it's okay to cross that threshold and step into that space where magical things can happen. Doesn't mean it's not scary.
Yes.
So, Aaron, thank you very much, and thank you for being able to bring some of that back home to be able to share that with other people, and that allows us to go through the full circle of a hero's journey.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us, and if you are interested in Aaron and Philan's adventures on their bus and as they travel around, simplyusandabus.com and on Instagram, I'm assuming Twitter as well, but you can go to their website and also check out things as they evolve over these next few months. Thank you very much for being with us today, and I look forward to seeing you next week.